the North is still not united. Rivalries simmer, old grudges linger, and then, in 131, everything breaks. That year, House Bolton invades Umber lands, instead of uniting to stop it. The Starks also enter the conflict on their own side, seeing both House Umber and Bolton as their enemies, turning what could have been a border war into a three-way struggle between the Boltons, Umbers, and Starks. This conflict was to decide who would hold dominance over the North, or the three involved believed that it would be as such. The war is short, violent, and decisive, with many battles that take place over a short period of time. At the Battle of Cold Head, Bolton forces defeat Ryland Umber, breaking the Umber's momentum early in the war. Soon after, at the Battle of Old Longfort, the Boltons defeat the Stark host and the remaining Umber hosts outright in a battle of the three armies. During this campaign, Edwyle Bolton, the brother of King Herrick Bolton, is killed, and Herrick Bolton then enacts his revenge upon the captives, torturing and flaying Stark and Umber men. As the North bleeds, an outsider looks to strike into the North. In 134, Lord Alistair Bardrox, an Andal warlord, invades the Bolton lands of Keystone to claim the lands for himself and his Andal peoples. His invasion collapses though at the Battle of Bosketch, where the Bolton and Tyrell forces crush the Andals, forcing Bardrox to flee back towards the Vale from whence he came, proving that even a divided North that is battling itself is still dangerous to invade. By 135, the wars between Starks, Umbers, and the Boltons and the Andals grind to a halt. While no side can claim a victory, it is the Boltons who come out of it the strongest. In 140, the Boltons repel a Skagosi Kroll invasion, reinforcing the reputation of King Herrick Bolton as a vicious and competent military leader. And then when winter seems to start to loosen its grip, old hatreds start to resurface, though the hatred must wait, as in 141 a false spring takes place, where many believe that the winter is breaking, but suddenly it quickly returns with a vengeance, and everyone must wait and try to wait out the difficult winter to come. In 145, the Boltons strike again once the false spring has concluded. They launch an invasion into the Last Lands, and during the fighting, King Ryland Umber is slain after fighting the Bolton forces while defending his lands. The Umbers weakened from their defeats before the false spring, and the false spring itself having weakened them. Many of their soldiers died during the continued winter. 2 Umbers were also captured, Hullen Umber, who was sent to the wall by Herrick Bolton, and Desmond Umber, who was tortured and executed. Marlon Umber, the brother of Desmond, is allowed to keep his seat as Lord Umber, bending the knee to House Bolton to save the Umber house. By 150, the Boltons aid in the removal of a Night's Watch Lord Commander, a Durrandon by the name of Argilac, who had broken his vows and declared himself king of the Wall. Even the Wall is no longer beyond northern politics. Cregan Stark is also demanded by King Herrick to pay tribute to the Boltons or face invasion. Cregan swallows his pride and becomes a tributary of House Bolton, paying him a yearly tithe and swearing to fight for him. While being allowed to keep his crown and independence, it appears that the Boltons under King Herrick, even as he ages, are the premier power in the north, dominant and ever expanding. While the great houses clash across the north, the Riverlands are consumed by a long civil war. In 128, brothers Boris and Robert Ryder plunged their lands into civil war after their father's death, remembered as the conflict of the White Horse and the Black Horse. The fighting drags on for years, with victories and defeats on both sides, tearing the Riverlands apart. By 131, Boris emerges victorious and Robert flees. Boris's rule begins shakily. He struggles with legitimacy. He becomes rivals with Lord Osric Ironbane, and even has to execute a fisher for supposedly being disloyal, causing his rule to be unstable. Robert then returns in 134 for one last attempt at power. It completely fails. Robert dies, falling in battle, and with him, the civil war finally comes to a final conclusion. From there, Boris grows into his crown. He marries into House Marsh, has children, and by 138, earns real loyalty from his vassals. That confidence turns outward in 143, when Boris launches an invasion against King Cregan Stark, claiming his lands on his side of the White Knife, opposite to that of Bolton's. as he believes that the land should belong to the Barrowlands. The war drags on for years, but one thing becomes clear. Rider cavalry dominates the battlefield, and especially in the open fields and steppes of the Barrowlands. By 147, the Starks and Grey Starks sue for peace, acknowledging Rider's strength and their control over the territories that they had gained over Stark. In 151, Cragorn Greyjoy invades the Rider lands, and by 153, seizes the island of Farstone, unable to defeat the Greyjoys. At Farstone, the Rider King rides northwards. He enters the Wolfswood, and many Wolfswood clans and Lord Ferrus Glover rebel against the Ironborn and swear fealty to the Rider King in 155. In the Wolfswood, rule changes hands quietly but ominously. In 133, Doran Glover abdicated, replaced by Vagnar Glover, a dwarf and spiritual leader who governs through belief rather than fear. His wife, Promatalhart, had died mysteriously years earlier, and rumors follow his reign that the Warg King is following him and his family after they had been unlanded by the Riders, Starks, and Glovers. Vagnar forges ties with the Wolfswood Lords and Children of the Forest, and in 143, his clans aid House Rider against the Starks. That independence ends in 145, when Harris the Blackchain Whore subjugates the Wolfswood with a test of power. In 148, Vagnar is torn apart by wolves, just like his wife before him, and many believe that the Warg King is definitely responsible and somehow still alive. Ferrus Glover inherits and conquers the Greenwoods in 149, though the Wolfswood remains under Ironborn tribute until 155, as previously stated. That is when the Wolfswood comes under the vassalization of the Riders after they are liberated. And in the Neck, peace is held differently. In 148, Tallow Marsh marries Shara Greatiron, a beautiful woman, uniting the houses to preserve stability. In 150, Midra Marsh is forced to abdicate, allowing Tallow to rule. Unlike much of the North, their marriage becomes a rare moment of genuine affection and calm. Even though the Great Irons and Marshes were enemies a few years earlier and even did battle with one another, they have come to respect one another. For the present moment, while the construction of Moat Cailin expands and more giants and Children of the Forest emerge in the swamps after being invited there by the Marshes years earlier. This era of the Vale is defined by consolidation, not through compromise, but through steady, relentless conquest under House Royce. The first major shift comes in 130, when the Royces launch an invasion of the Mundagane lands of Strongsong, former lands of House Belmore. Lord Gillian Mundagane, supported by Hersey allies, defends his lands from the Royces. The campaign is decisive, though, as the Royce forces meet them in open battle in the rocky hills and mountains, defeating Gillian by ambushing them as they're traveling to war. And by 131, the Mundaganes are fully conquered and unlanded from the lands of Strongsong. Gillian is forced from the lands, and Royce expands his control to the northern mountains with the help of Swigert and Horn. The Royces don't slow down after that victory, and they are keen on uniting the Vale for the first time. After his initial defeat in 131, King Lorien Hersey kills himself in shame. His daughter, Maya Hersey, inherits what little remains of his kingdom. In 133, they begin tightening their grip across the Vale. They grow closer to the Crab King in the Blackwater. The Royces come to aid the House Horn in defense of the Cut after they had been invaded by Queen Maya Hersey as she attempted to reunite and recapture her lands. The warlord Ambrose fighting for Maya Hersey is also destroyed by the Royces, and what little remains of Alistair Bardrox's forces that didn't march north are also crushed. Crushing these Andals, the Royces crush the newly arriving Andal warlords and defeat them in the field, defeating the last hopes of House Hersey. By 135, the final step is taken. The Royces defeat Queen Maya Hersey outright, and her forces swear fealty to the Royces, completing the unification of the Vale under one ruler. For the first time in this era, the Vale stands united under House Royce, and the forces of the Andals in the Vale have been defeated or vassalized. The cost of this conquest is felt almost immediately. In 136, King Russ the Strong Royce dies just after finishing the unification of this realm. His death comes at a moment of victory, and he never lives to see the peace he created. His successor, Arthur Royce, inherits a powerful but fragile kingdom. Arthur rules cautiously, and in 143, he marches into the Riverlands intending to aid the Mud First Men rebels in a claim war for the throne. But he finds no enemy willing to meet him. Rather than overextend himself, Arthur withdraws, choosing to avoid conflict with the Rivermen. Instead of marching deeper into their lands to seek out conflict, he returns back to the Vale. Internal unrest finally breaks out though in 148, when Lyman Moonfell launches a rebellion, citing the mistreatment of the Faith of the Seven vassals and their peoples. The civil war lasts for a time, but the outcome is clear. The Royces defeat the Moonfell forces and their rebels, and Lyman is forced to flee the Vale, though his house is allowed to retain its lands. Around this time, a branch of the Mondagenes secure their rule over the Sisters and begin to raid the coastlines with those that they had converted. They combined Andal technology with that of the Sistermen, creating a unique and deadly combination. That same year, Arthur deals with multiple threats at once. He fends off Andal raiders from the Sisters, and he intervenes in a Waynwood dynastic civil war and resolves it by awarding the disputed lands to Helgard Waynwood, preventing another civil war. And by 155, the Vale stands unified and orderly, but beneath that order lies a kingdom built on broken houses, forced loyalty, and memories of defeat that haven't truly faded, and the horns of the cut and the dogs of the fingers are still independent. In 129, King Armistead II Vance passes away, remembered as the Fool. His passing leaves the Riverlands in the hands of his 17-year-old grandson, a young ruler inheriting a kingdom poised for greatness, though still trying to find its feet, guided by the hands of House Denford, and more specifically, the great Corlys Denford. In 130, the Darkland King, King Runsford Darkland, launches an invasion of Cracklaw Point for the province of Strongbox. After a battle with the Cracklaw natives, he is victorious and secures the lands for himself in a needed victory for his new reign. Early on, the Vances still appear strong. They act as regional power brokers, rather than a realm in crisis. In 135, they aid King Runsford Darkland in his war against the Durandans, supporting the Darkland interests along the Blackwater, and helping them push back the Stormlander influence. They defeat the Durandans at the Battle of High Hill. With the assistance of the Mudds, Vances, and the Darklands, the Durandans are defeated as they hold the hill against the Durandans, who are broken and then forced to retreat. They leave back across the river. By 140, the Riverlands are pulled into a deep personal and ideological conflict with the House Mudd. Christopher the Brave Mudd rises to power against Christopher the Justheart Mudd, framing his rebellion around the resentment of the Mudds' conversion to Faith of the Seven. This isn't just a succession dispute, it's a religious fracture, and it sends shockwaves through the region. This conflict had been boiling for years and years now, and has finally come into view with the death of King Edric Mudd in 139. The conflict cannot proceed, though, as the false spring comes in 141, ceasing any marches or rallying of armies. Sadly for the Rivermark and House Vance, the great Lord Corlys Denford passes away from an illness at the onset of the false spring. With his death, many come to mourn his passing and pay their respects. He is remembered as a valiant knight, lord, the guiding light of the Rivermark, loyal, selfless, and one of the greatest men, other than the Armistead the Great, to have come from the Rivermark. He is followed by his son, Theodore Denford, who has immense shoes to fill. The Vances side with the Justheart, for him being Faith of the Seven, and the fighting begins around 143, when the winter officially ends. Battles are fought, loyalties are tested, and by 146, the rebellion is mostly crushed after numerous vicious battles. Christopher the Brave is defeated. The damage is done, however, and the Mud Kingdom finds itself still divided even after the battles have been fought, and the first men flee to the nearby hills, and they are unwilling to accept defeat. The true breaking point comes in 148. That year, Princess Elsa Mudd raises an army of the undead. Villages are emptied, panic spreads, old rivalries stop mattering overnight, and the Mudds and the Vances are forced to fight side by side with each other again, whether they are First Men or Andals, not for power but for survival. The war against Elsa's forces is brutal and unnatural, and is a war against fear. The conflict is solved by the assistance of the Vances, the Risleys, the Darklands, and the Loyalist Mud forces who come together to destroy the undead threat. After having dealt with Baneford, It seems that these events have become more commonplace in Westeros, and at the same time, Theodore Denford passes away in 148 from an illness similar to that of his father, and his son, the soon-to-be great Lord Florian Denford, comes to power and immediately takes to the field to make a name for himself, and he does. King Armistead III, now firmly on the throne, begins to unravel. He rules harshly, exacting brutal punishments upon his prisoners of war and his own firstmen populations, and ordering the killing of many children of the forest wherever they can be found. Fear replaces loyalty, and unrest spreads. The Blackwood Vale joins the first men of the Mud Kingdom in rebellion, even while the undead still linger. Believing that the crown has gone too far, they need to respond. The response is swift and merciless by the Vances. In 149, Corlys Vance, the king's own brother, oversees the punishment personally at the Blackwoods. The Blackwood Lord is killed in a duel by Corlys, and his son, while he's trying to protect his father's body, is cut down where he stands by Corlys as well. The youngest son of the Blackwood family is taken as a hostage by Corlys, a living reminder of the price of defiance against the Vances. The weirwoods across the Riverlands are burned and destroyed by Armistead and his Andals of the Rivermark whenever the opportunity is found. By 150, the undead threat is finally crushed, and the first men settle for now. Elsa Mudd and her forces are destroyed, and the great internal rebellions burn out. For the first time in years, the Riverlands seem to have a chance to recover, and the Mud Kingdom, injured and battered, tries to take time to recover, but they don't get it. Sensing weakness, the Crannig men of the Neck launch an invasion into the Mud Kingdom, believing them to be exhausted and vulnerable. Instead, they meet a determined and veteran force defending their lands. King Christopher V Mudd confronts them in the northern Riverlands and defeats them decisively, defeating House Marsh of the Neck in the process. It's a hard, vicious, and short war that ends after only a couple battles. They do not achieve a major victory against the Crannig men without receiving immense casualties themselves. Despite this victory, the crown of the Mudds continues to fracture. The Darklands no longer see a reason to allow the Fishers to keep their lands, and with their inheritance in question, King Runsford Darkland, after his victory in Cracklaw, launches an invasion of the Fisher lands. He is victorious after the siege of Misty Isle, and they barely struggle to take the lands for themselves. The lands of House Fisher are rewarded to the Andal Lord of Roy Cargo for his loyalty to the Darkland forces. Runsford sadly passes away in early 153, and his son, Corlys Darkland, the descendant of Corlys Denford's daughter and his father Runsford, ascends to the throne. By 153, Armistead III Vance has grown openly unstable. His paranoia turns outwards. After the campaigns in the Riverlands, he blames the Westerlands for these undead threats that took place in the Riverlands. He blames many in the Westerlands for the faults and problems of the Riverlands, and he fixates on the Lannisters for these perceived insults against him and his house. He launches an invasion of the Golden Tooth seeking glory and a distraction. The campaign fails with a bitter defeat in the mountain passes with his vassals and his Mud allies who came to assist him. Vance's forces are defeated and humiliated, and forced to withdraw just as the Ironborn begin to invade the Westerlands. King Armistead III Vance, as part of the peace deal, is forced to march his men to fight for the Westerlands during the winter against the Ironborn. This causes him to go even more mad as the conflict drags on, and while on campaign, he is forever changed as the snow, blood, violence, and death breaks his mind completely. By 155, he has returned home from the war. As he is slipping deeper and deeper into madness, the kingdom is buried in debt, the Mudds are barely holding on, and the Darklands seem to be the only ones experiencing any sort of success. From the very beginning, Ironborn pressure is constant. In 130, the Lannisters and Risleys attempt yet another invasion of Fair Isle. It fails, like every attempt before it. The message is clear, very early on, that Fair Isle is never going to be taken easily. That same year, Cragorn Greyjoy ascends to the lordship after his father's death. He doesn't need time to prove himself. He already has a reputation as a feared raider, and he immediately begins expanding Greyjoy power. In 132, Cragorn conquers the island of Saltcliffe, bringing it firmly under Greyjoy control, and then from there, all the Ironborn start to raid the Westerlands, and clashes along the coasts, victories mixed with losses in 138, but never full retreats as they test the Westerland defenses. Harris the Blackchain Whore emerges as one of the most dangerous figures of this era. In 133, Harris leads a raid against the recently liberated Maesters. He defeats them in the field and sacks the Cape. The Ironborn do not stay, but they show that they have the ability to return to the Cape and take it over once again in the future. By 145, Harris takes things even further. He invades the Wolfswood, and after a test of prowess against the Glover King, forces the region into Ironborn tributary status. That same year, the Ironborn fleet raids the Reach, returning home successful and unchallenged. In 148, Harris turns north again and raids the Riverlands, successfully bloodying their noses of the Horse Lords while they recover from their civil war. Cragorn Greyjoy continues expanding, and in 148, the Greyjoys defeat the Reach army outright, and then, in 151, Cragorn declares an annexation of Farstone Isle from the House Rider. After repeated defeats, the island falls, and by 153 it is firmly in Ironborn hands, though the Riders do not take this beating lying down and turn their aggression northwards away from the island that they cannot achieve a victory on. In 152, the Lannisters make another attempt at Fair Isle. It fails again, but what follows is an Ironborn escalation. In 153, while the Westerlands is distracted fighting the Riverlands and the Ironborn, they invade Case, and this time, they're victorious. And Case falls, and with the winter settling in, the Ironborn demand recognition of their gains, and the Lannister king stubbornly refuses. So the Ironborn do what they always do. In 155, during the depths of winter, the Ironborn forces sack Lannisport. The city is set on fire, Land Sept is destroyed and ransacked, and members of the most devout are killed. And they had chosen Lannisport to be their home very recently. The population is raped and pillaged, while the Lannister king hides in Casterly Rock. The Ironborn sit on the coast, holding Case and Lannisport, waiting for the surrender of the Lannisters, which it never comes. By 155, the Iron Islands are at the height of their power, not because they rule vast lands, but because they have proven something far, far more important. They can strike anywhere, they can strike anytime, and stopping them costs more than any kingdom can afford. After the death of King Gerald II Lannister in 125, Robert Lannister ascends to the throne. Much of his early rule is shaped by his mentor, Robert Risley, a stabilizing force within the realm. That stability ends, though, abruptly in 128, when Robert Risley dies in a wrestling match to a giant while he is trying to peacefully integrate the Ashmark into the Westerlands realm. The loss leaves the young king hardened and suspicious, and the tone of the Westerlands' rule shifts overnight. Ronald Risley succeeds his father, Robert Risley, as regent of the realm, but almost immediately the Lannister king puts him under immense stress. For a time, Robert Lannister proves himself through action, and between 135 and 140, he personally oversees the defense of the coast, beating back repeated Ironborn raids. These aren't glorious battles, they're grinding, brutal defenses, fought in smoke and salt, but the rock holds. Ronald Risley dies in 136 from the stress that the Lannister king puts him through, or at least that's what the Risleys argue. This starts to make a rift between the two families, which Robert Risley wishes to fix. Roymar Risley comes to power and immediately plans an invasion of the Ashmark to avenge the death of Robert Risley, and because of the Lannies of Ashmark having refused to integrate with their realm. In 139, Roymar leads the invasion of the Ashmark and defeats the giant who killed Robert in a duel, but then he dies himself shortly after in the battle to a child of the Forest Arrow. His son Russell Risley comes to power and finishes the war by defeating the Ashmark First Men. They remove Pete Lanny from power, kill him, and then place John Lanny in power, a Faith of the Seven Knight. In 141, Robert strengthens his eternal ties by marrying Rhiann Risley to try and bind the crown even closer to the family that once guided it, and to fix the stress and problems between the two houses. Around this time, the Pendrick League forms, a northern alliance of Westerland lords who have come together and follow House Risley as their guiding light. House Lanny, Banefort, Westerling, and Broom all compose this Pendrick League. All of them are rather unhappy with the direction of the Westerlands, but accept peace with the marriage that has come between the Risleys and the Lannisters for the time being. And, at the same time, Lord Gawain Banefort at this time also becomes the first knight of House Banefort, and works to restore the reputation of the Baneforts after the necromantic uprising of Mordred Banefort. In 143, Robert launches a limited invasion of the Reach, targeting the lands of Tolpass. One decisive victory is enough, and Tolpass is taken. The war does not expand further for a moment, and it looks like the Westerlands are asserting their dominance. That illusion collapses in 145. The Gardeners invade the Westerlands, reigniting the conflict on a larger scale. Tolpass is lost, and the Westerlands gain Greenfield, but the battles swing back and forth. Victories are traded for losses, and losses are traded for victories, and neither side can force a true conclusion. The war only ends when Green Gardener dies of an illness in 146, draining the conflict of momentum rather than solving it. The Westerlands survive, but they are weakened. No land is gained or lost on either side, and the conflict was rather bloody. The Gardeners' immense numbers and the Westerlands' well-trained soldiers brought the fighting to a stalemate, and neither were able to achieve a major victory over each other, leaving the fields strewn with dead Reachmen and Westermen. In 152, the Lannisters attempt another invasion of Fair Isle after the stalemate against the Reach. It fails miserably, and the fleet is destroyed by the Ironborn. And in 153, the Westerlands are invaded on two fronts by the Riverlands and the Iron Islands. The Riverlands are defeated, but the Ironborn succeed. Case falls, and the coast is left exposed, and Lannisport is destroyed. Robert Lannister refuses to surrender. That decision seals the realm's fate. The Lannister king refuses to see reason. He remains inside Casterly Rock, while Lannisport itself becomes a port for the Ironborn, as they lay siege to Casterly Rock and take away thralls to the Iron Islands by the hundreds. The rest of his vassals in the Rock grow discontent, and the Pendrick League meet to discuss the future of the Rock itself. Unlike the North or the Riverlands, the Reach doesn't explode all at once. Instead, it slowly begins to come apart at the seams, held together more by tradition and loyalty. By 139, Garth IX comes to power, though, in truth, Green Gardener has been the one guiding and manipulating the realm long before that. When Garth fully takes the throne, he is well liked by most, and is seen as approachable and an agreeable king. Early on, the Reach appears to be stable. The stability doesn't last, though, as during 141 and 142, the Reach fights a series of border conflicts with the Westerlands. These wars never escalate into a full conquest, but they are costly and bitter. Neither side gains a decisive advantage, and the fighting settles into a stalemate. The conflict was also brought on by the Lannister king's desire to kill children of the forest which resided around Red Lake. Then, in 141, the Year of the False Spring takes place. Armies that expected warmth instead face returning winters. Supply lines collapse, campaigns stall, and the momentum on both sides die, and the conflict simply bleeds out rather than ending clearly. For the Reach, though, it was a good defense against the Westerlands as it stopped their advance. War returns in 145, but now on a broader scale. Green Gardener escalates the conflict, seeing a need to decisively defeat the Westerlands in the field and to show that the Reach could not be invaded and cut apart as if it was some sort of animalistic kill in a field. The Reach loses Greenfield, but it regains Tolpass in return. Victories and defeats are traded, and neither side can force the other into a decisive conclusion. Though, in 146, Green Gardener dies of an illness, and with him goes the will to continue the conflict. And the fighting stops, unresolved and unsatisfied for everybody involved. The war ends not with triumph, but with death. The border regions of the Reach and the Westerlands stay relatively the same. From that point forward, the Reach begins to gradually fracture internally. The Northern Reach refuses to pay taxes, angered by what they see as Garth's softness towards the Andals, especially after the death of Green Gardener. Faith and identity become political weapons in the Reach, and the support begins to shift towards Gawain Gardener, a true first man that many view, a figure that should be ruling instead. Though he doesn't outright take power away from the king, and he waits. At the same time, the Hightowers quietly consolidate power in the south. They play friendly with Garth, avoid open confrontation, while the faith is spreading throughout the lands of the Reach and whispers begin to circulate that the Hightowers could rule on their own if they chose to. Elsewhere, old rivalries continue to flare and continue to deepen the divides in the Reach, while House Peak maintains its position through a constant warfare, having defeated the Merryweathers and the Manderleys early in this era. In 145, Lord Joshua Peak fights a border war against the Danes, joined by Lord Gawain Gardner himself, a reminder that even as the crown weakens, the nobility remains sharp and ambitious. Lord Peak is victorious in his endeavors in the raid against the Fowlers and the Danes in the passes. Shortly after this raid, around 147, a large band of Sand Dornish refugees cross into the Reach in the Stormlands seeking new homes. The Peaks do battle with these Sand Dornish fleeing from Dorne, and they kill many of them, chasing them away into the Stormlands. House Peak has quickly become one of the strongest houses in the Reach, next to that of House Hightower. By 155, the Reach still stands intact, but it is struggling with its identity, its faith, and its ability to find victories. And the crown has been questioned, the nobility are restless, and the kingdom survives less because of its strength, and more because no one has yet pushed enough or hard enough to break it. It was strong underneath Green Gardner's leadership, but without him, the loyal lords have gone into conflict with one another, and the Reach's future is uncertain. They need a leader to step forth to take the reins of this kingdom. The period opens in 129, when King Baron Durrandon successfully recaptures Tarth from House Uller, restoring House Blacktide to the power there. The naval invasion is also assisted by the Green Queen, who sends Children of the Forest with their bows and magic to assist. The battles on the beaches are vicious, and they push up the hills and into the mountains, and drive out all the Andal forces and recapture Tarth for House Blacktide. In 132, Baron then launches another invasion to reclaim the Gauntlet from the rebellious Laygoods and their new masters the Darklands, responding to the rebellion by the Laygoods. The campaign fails as a Faith of the Seven alliance of the Mudds, Vances, and Darklands come to defeat the Stormlanders, forcing Baron to withdraw, especially after his vassals have no more desire to fight there. At the same time, disaster strikes in the south. While Baron's armies are tied down fighting in the Blackwater, the Danes invade the Stoneway, reclaiming the territory that the Stormlands had taken earlier. The Durrandons and the Dundarians fail to hold the Castle Will. The Dornish region taken over in less than a single year. The Stormlands lose control on both fronts, while Castle Will falls into the hands of House Dane, who returns the lands to House Will. In 141, a familiar name returns, Alistair Bardrox. Defeated years earlier in the north, he attempts to make another invasion, yet this time he focuses on the south at Massey's Hook. His timing is terrible though, as the false spring takes place just as his invasion starts. Alistair came all the way from the north, and after his defeats, he makes another attempt in the south and he fails yet again. His armies are caught out in the snows and are defeated, and he is forced to retreat from the Hook, unable to support himself or his forces, and Baron manages to find another victory. In 146, King Baron launches an invasion into the Peasbury lands, expecting it to be an easy victory, but the war drags on for 2 years of vicious fighting as the Peasburys are unwilling to relinquish their crown willingly. But by 148, the Peasburys are subjugated and they bend the knee willingly, after much of the fighting has taken place, and the Reach were unable to respond as they were dealing with the Westerlands. Baron makes a decision that also nearly destroys his kingdom. In 148, he grants Dornish refugees a safe place in the Stormlands, the ones that the Peaks had been battling with. The Marcher lords of the Stormlands become furious and demand the immediate withdrawal of these peoples, which the king refuses. The Marchers immediately rebel. They first offer the crown to Willis Dundarian, who refuses and betrays them. The rebels then crown Mace Caron as their Marcher king, and what follows is a vicious civil war. Battles are fought across the marches, loyalties are shattered, and the fighting only ends in late 149 when Baron finally defeats the rebellion in a decisive battle. The victory comes at a cost. Worn down by stress and age, King Baron dies almost immediately after the war is won. The throne passes to Elenay Durrandon, his daughter, who secures her rule in the only way that a Stormlander could ever respect, through feats of strength, duels, and sheer dominance. She proves that even though that she is a woman, she has conquered and embarrassed her rivals. She refuses Dundarian's demands for lands once she becomes queen, and she becomes the first female ruler of the Stormlands in living memory, and by 155, the Stormlands are coming into a new era under Storm Queen Ela Durrandon. The Danes begin this period in a strong position. In 132, they reclaim the Stoneway from the Stormlands, securing it fully by 133, and this period brings about a very strong and powerful kingdom. But in 139, King Dagos Dane, their strong and powerful ruler, passes away, and this leaves uncertainty in the Dane kingdom. His successor, when he comes to the throne, immediately begins a push for Lucifer Dryland, a claimant from the desert, to be placed on the new throne of the Desert Kingdom. This conflict becomes known as the First Brothers' War. On one side stands Lucifer, fighting for the old ways and reduced Andal influence, while on the other side stands Tamsin II, a claimant raised firstly by the Faith of the Seven, and is deeply shaped by a mix of Andal and desert clansman culture that would later become dominant in Western Dorne. This war is decisive. In 139, Tamsin defeats both Dane and Lucifer in the field. Tamsin II becomes king, and with him, Dorne begins to change. Under his rule, the Sun Dornish culture begins to rise to power in the West. New traditions, new military practices, and new ideals take hold. A mixture of Sand Dornish and Andal heritage coming together as one in the deep sands of Dorne to make a unique culture like the world has never seen before. And the Danes truly begin to fight a defensive conflict from here on out as their kingdom is put on the defense. In 145, the Danes suffer another blow as House Peak launches a successful border invasion against them, and elsewhere, old houses fall completely. In 128, the Ironwoods attempt an invasion of God's Grace, and they fail terribly. Their army is destroyed, their lands are then annexed, their titles stripped, and Uther Ironwood, the last blood royal, is executed by King Simeon II Santagar, and the Ironwoods are erased from Dornish politics entirely. The once mighty house that seemed unstoppable and poised to conquer all of Dorne has now been conquered by the Santagars, and their lands have been divided up between the Roxtons and the Pengroses. Simeon II rules peacefully until 144, but beneath the surface, divisions grow, rivalries form, and between Andal houses, scandals spread and trusts erode. In the final years of King Simeon II's reign was marred with rising internal divisions amongst the Andal lords. Todonar and Lady Bright became bitter rivals over an indiscretion of Todonar's heir Aubrey with the First Lord Lady Bright's daughter Evelyn, and was suspected in the murder of her Illyrian husband in 139. Todonar and Pengrose were sometimes looked down upon by their other Andal houses and are seen as little better than pirates and raiders. King Simeon III Santagar is coronated, and he quickly tries to unite the realm. He tries to silence any worries, and he tries to give equal importance to all of his vassals, and he tries to show the power of the Santagars and keep his kingdom united after their great victory over the Ironwoods.